teacher, 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 teacher,
technology,
teacher, teacher, teacher,
network,
teacher,
network,
teacher,
network, music,
technology,
teacher,
network, music,
technology,
teacher.
network.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Tips and Tricks for Music Educators. This is Heath with the Music Technology Teacher Network, and I appreciate you checking out our video here on our YouTube channel at MuTech TeacherNet. If you enjoy this and find it useful, I would encourage you to tell your friends and colleagues about it. It would be awesome if you hit that subscribe button to get some more followers and share and like. So in this episode, I'm going to be talking about Google Forms. And a lot of people now are using Google Classroom, and it is a great learning management system. And Google Forms is really cool. But one of the things that I've learned through using Google Forms that it's important to think about how you want to have your data organized after you give the students a Google form and they start returning this data that you're going to collect. So taking a few steps on the front end as you design that Google form, I think is very helpful on the other end. So let's start with a quiz I made for my music technology students using Google Forms. So when I first started using Google Forms, I would have the students put a box in for them to enter their name, and then I would jump right into the quiz. The problem that created for me was something like this, where I'm giving it to multiple classes. You can see I have 187 responses. Is that when it was time to enter the grades into my grade book is organized by classes, but I had not set my Google form up to sort this information by class. So I learned that in addition to the name, it's great to add an item where they can indicate which class period they're in, because once I create my spreadsheet with this, I'm going to be able to organize it by class period. The other thing is the student name. So when I just put name, the students would do what most of us do, which is enter our first names first. The problem I found was that our grade books are organized by our students' last names, and even their if you have it collect student email addresses, if you're using student accounts, the student email addresses are also set up with their first names first. So in order to be able to sort them by last name, I either would have to create two separate items, a box for their first name, a box for their last name, which can be a little cumbersome. But for my students, I just put it into a single item and ask them to put their first name first, followed by their first initial, which is going to be very helpful when I'm ready to organize that data on the other end. Before we get there, I just also want to just go over quickly as you're putting items together. For me, in my music technology, oftentimes there are things on their computer that I want them to be able to recognize visually. So on these question items, you can add images. So if I was teaching band or orchestra, that maybe I would want them to think about proper posture and playing position, or maybe proper hand position on their instrument. So you could do things like maybe either take an image, take a camera of yourself demonstrating proper and maybe improper playing position or hand positions, or you can find images on the internet as long as you're following good copyright protocol. And so you could post an image up. The students could then comment or list two things that you would improve about this person's posture and playing position. So that's just one example of images you could add. You could also add things like an image of a fingering chart to maybe ask, what would be, this fingering could be used as an alternate fingering for which notes, things like that. So adding images to questions is really helpful. You'll notice over here on the side, you can also add videos. So, and when you click on that, it takes you to YouTube. Some people may not realize, but YouTube is owned by Google. And so those two things integrate with each other really naturally and really well. For our student Google accounts in the school system I work for, it actually uses the YouTube verification protocol for their username and passwords. And that's working in the background, so a lot of students don't actually realize it, but it's actually YouTube that's verifying their information in order for them to get into Google Classroom. So once you give the quiz and you're ready to check out the responses, let's take a look at that. So you can see this quiz I've already gotten 180 responses. So all of my students from all of my classes are responding to this quiz. So some of the information here that's really good is that you can actually analyze each of the items on the quiz, which is helpful in helping you design your instruction and things that maybe you need to review or things that you don't need to review with your students. So for example, this item, 95% are getting that correct. They've got a pretty good handle on that. So probably don't need to, do that. Well, this one, 68%. So that's a little bit lower. 98%, that's really good. So it's a good way to kind of analyze this different chunks of the information that students are getting. Another thing to think about, let me show you one example here. On this question, 81% of the students are getting this correct, BPM. But the thing that stood out to me with this is that of the students who are getting it wrong, almost all of them are giving the same wrong answer. There are a few others out here, but a big chunk are answering this as beats per measure instead of beats per minute. So that would indicate something where a pretty significant chunk of the class needs some clarity to make sure that they're getting that correct, that they're not getting that mixed up. So there's a lot of different ways you can go through and look at this information and help you kind of focus your instruction as you're moving through whatever you're assessing with the quiz. So now when it comes to getting this in a spreadsheet. So with Google Forms, you've got this great little button here that says create a spreadsheet. So when you click on that, it's going to let you create a spreadsheet. You can give it a name if you want to change it. And it's going to link to Google Sheets and create a spreadsheet for me. So real quick, I'm going to put these names out of the way to help protect those identities. So here is a spreadsheet that's created of, it's giving me the score for all the students, but you can see also I have all these classes that are listed in this one big spreadsheet. But because I've had them add this class period, if I come click on this first row, I can create what's called a filter. And so what the filter will do, now you can see it's added these arrows that I can come down and say, okay, I only want you to show me the 6A students. So it's going to filter out and show me just the students in that group. Now, if I had the student names out here, I could also sort it by last name. And so then I've got it sorted by class period and by the student last name, which makes it much easier to transfer over into my grade book. And I did that because I'm thinking about organizing that Google form before I send it out. Now, another example I want to share with you is sometimes I may have students read an article. So for many years, if I was doing something like this, I would maybe put a quiz at the end of the article. But there's a lot of research that says if you want to check retention, it's much better to kind of quiz along the way. So what I'll do with these articles is, in this example, we'll go through the first few pages, and then I've embedded a quiz. So the students can click on this link, and then that's going to take them to a Google quiz where they can answer some questions about the first part of the article. Then they go to the middle part of the article, and I've embedded a second quiz, and then to the end, and I've got a third quiz. So that's a great strategy to assess retention and to make sure that the students are reading the article all the way through and not just kind of skimming across. But what that's going to do is it's now created 3 separate Google forms. So if I go to this first one, I can see the link to this first Google form, and I've got the questions that I've put in and the responses. So if I go over here and click my Google Sheet, I'm going to create a new sheet, and I'm going to call this demo, and I'm going to go ahead and create that spreadsheet. So again, I can go through and have this organized, add the filters with my student names and how I'm collecting that information. But when I go to the second quiz that I've embedded, and I click on spreadsheet again, for this one, I don't want to create 3 separate spreadsheets. I actually want to compile all this into a single spreadsheet. So what I'm going to do now is select existing spreadsheet and then select. And hopefully that's going to bring up the spreadsheet that I just created, the demo spreadsheet. see if I can help this along. Demo 6. And this is always, actually a great example that, technology is not always going to work exactly the way you want it to all the time. So you just have to be patient. And so hopefully this is it. All right, so now you can see what it's done. It's created this new spreadsheet. And if you look at the bottom, what it's done is created this as a second tab on the spreadsheet. So if I go to the third spreadsheet and I want to add that to the one that I've already created, and this one's still not wanting to connect. Let's see if maybe we can reload this one to help it along. Here we go. So I'm going to add that. And so again, now I've got a third tab down here at the bottom where it's combining all this information. So even though I've got 3 separate Google Forms, I can compile those all into the same spreadsheet. And so once I do that, say I want to give them a grade, and their grade's going to be an average between those 3 quizzes. So I can create another sheet. And again, I'm going to organize this and make sure that I have this matched up with the correct student names and that sort of thing. But for now, what I'm doing is I'm selecting all these columns and then using my Command C to copy. And then I'm pasting over here. And again, I'm going to take some time to make sure that I have this aligned by student, but for just this example. So once I have some data, what I can do now is select the rows and then come over to my functions and create an average. And that's going to give me an average score between those 3 quizzes. And then the other thing that's pretty cool is if I come over to this box and grab this handle and drag down, it's actually going to copy this function, but as I'm copying it, you can see in the upper left-hand corner, it is changing the rows. So it's automatically going to average those grades for me, and I can sort it by student name and have it all ready to get plugged into my gradebook. So those are a few things I've learned about Google Forms and thinking about how you want to organize the data as you're designing the form. So I hope you'll stay tuned and check out some more episodes that we're going to have coming up in the future, where we're going to go into some more details about Google Forms and Google applications, but also how you can integrate those with Apple tools and iPhones and iPads and that sort of thing. Once again, I encourage you to share with your friends and colleagues. Click that subscribe button. To all of you, I wish you health and safety and sanity during this time of this coronavirus outbreak. But even though we don't need to get close enough to shake hands and give hugs, smiles go a long way. So I hope that you'll tune in again soon. Thanks a lot.
Music,
technology,
music,
technology,
music, music,
technology,
teacher,
technology,
teacher, teacher,
network,
teacher,
network,
teacher,
network, music,
technology,
teacher,
network, music,
technology,
teacher,
network,
teacher,
network, music,
technology,
teacher,
network, music,
technology,
teacher,
network,
teacher.
teacher.